Hey guys, today I got a battle for you. I got a battle of the best Sony E Mount vlogging lens under $1,000. The contenders, the Tamron 17 to 28 millimeter f2.8 lens versus the Sony 20 millimeter f1.8. Who's gonna win? Let's go ahead and find out together. Welcome back to the channel, guys. On this channel, I review Sony cameras and lenses. If that's something that you're into, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Today, I got a battle for you. I got the Tamron 17 to 28 millimeter f2.8 versus the Sony 20 millimeter f1.8. Who is gonna win as the best vlogging lens? So let's say you just picked up your first full frame camera and you wanna get something wider than the kit lens. You have the two options. You have the Tamron 17 to 28 millimeter f2.8 or the Sony 20 millimeter f1.8. These two lenses are equivalent in price, pretty much right down to the dollar. Both lenses are gonna be just south of $900. In fact, they're $1 apart. This Tamron lens is gonna cost you $899, while the Sony is gonna cost you $898. So they're within $1 of each other, which makes this battle very, very competitive. So the weight on these lenses is about the same as well. So if you're looking to save a little weight, you're not gonna save it by going with one lens over the other. The Tamron here comes in at 14.82 ounces or 420 grams. And the length of it is gonna be 3.9 inches or 99 millimeters. Where the Sony's gonna come in at 13.16 ounces or 373 grams. Now this baby is a little bit shorter at 3.3 inches or 84, just under 85 millimeters. So as you can see, if you're throwing it on to your brand new either A7 IV, A7S III, or maybe you got the A7C, you're not gonna notice a big weight difference and your camera is gonna be pretty much the same exact size. So it makes these two very competitive. Now the Tamron goes from an f2.8 to an f22, while the Sony, it can get as low as f1.8 to f22. So we'll talk about what the difference is between that later on in the video. But as far as the aperture goes, the Sony does have a little trick up its sleeve. It does have an adjustable aperture ring. So you can adjust the aperture on this lens manually if you don't want to adjust it in camera. It's clickable and declickable, so if you're shooting video, you can declick it and then you get that smooth aperture turn. All right, so now we switched out to one of the lenses. I'm not gonna tell you which lens we have until the end of this segment. So let's talk a little bit about focal length. As you can see, we're a little bit wider. Before, I was shooting on the Sony 35 millimeter f1.4, but now I'm on a different lens. So let's first talk about the Sony 20 millimeter lens. As far as its focal length goes, you're gonna get that fixed 20 millimeter focal length. It's not gonna change unless you use APS-C mode or use clear image zoom. If you punch in APS-C mode, you're gonna get about a 30 millimeter equivalent. And if you punch in using clear image zoom at 1.5 times, you're gonna get up to 45 millimeters in focal length. You get a good reach, even though it's a 20 millimeter lens. And the 20 millimeters is definitely wide enough for vlogging. So now the Tamron 17 to 28 millimeter lens, that does have zoom capabilities. So you're gonna get all the way from 17 to 28 millimeter. Now you punch in an APS-C mode on that lens and the farthest focal distance you can get is 42 millimeters because you got 28 times 1.5 times. But then if you use clear image zoom, you can get up to 63 millimeters in focal length. So plenty of reach on that lens. It's a zoom lens, so you're gonna have way more options if you're out there running and gunning versus the 20 millimeter lens. Now that 3 millimeters, is it a big difference? Well, let me show you. So right now, if you haven't guessed it, we're on the Tamron 17 to 28 millimeter lens. Let's go ahead and zoom in to 20 millimeters and see what the difference looks like. And this is 20. Again, 20, 17. So you get a little bit more. So now we're at the 20 millimeters. So now you get a little bit more reach on the wider end. If you go all the way to 28 millimeter, now you got a lot more options here when you're using the zoom range. But does that make this the best vlogging lens? Let's keep talking. All right, so let's talk about low light options. So now I have a different lens on the camera, or maybe I have the same. So now you'll have to guess on which lens I have on the camera. But I can tell you in low light, the Tamron's gonna be pretty good. I mean, it's an f2.8. That's usually a nice aperture if you wanna get some good low light images. Is it gonna be as good as the f1.8 that the Sony 20 millimeter is gonna offer you? Having a lower f-stop is going to definitely improve that low light capability. But let's say you just picked up the Sony A7S III, or you picked up the new Sony A7 IV. Now both have a dual gain ISO. They're not advertising it on either camera, but it's definitely there. On the A7 IV, the image does clean up at 3200 ISO, but you also have acetone in bold, so you can use that in low light, because at the end of the day, low light, you don't need a lot of dynamic range. Right now I am shooting an S-Log3 on my Sony A7 IV, and this is what the image would look like in low light, but you could also bump it up using this acetone. Now the Sony 20mm is an f1.8 aperture. You're gonna get an extra stop and a half of light versus the Tamron 17 to 28mm. So both can have their purposes in low light, but the Sony is gonna do a little bit better in low light. So if you haven't guessed it already, I am on the Sony 20mm f1.8, and this is what the image quality is gonna look like using this in a nice pink room. Now the Sony 20mm is also a prime lens, so you're gonna get a little bit sharper of an image. Slightly. Now zoom lenses are definitely catching up when it comes to sharpness, but the 20mm is a prime lens. It's got a fixed focal length, so you're not gonna have to worry about glass moving around. So you can have better glass and a sharper image using a prime lens. The other thing with this lens is you're gonna get less vignetting in the corners. Now on the 17 to 28mm, you do get a little bit of vignetting, especially when you're at f2.8. Now right now I am shooting, like I said, with the Sony 20mm at an f2, and I'm overexposed by 1.3 stops. So I'm at ISO 2000, and the image quality I think looks very nice, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility to go down a little bit lower. But that's the advantage of having a lower f-stop, is it gives you the ability to go down a little bit lower. But does that make the Sony 20mm the best option for vlogging? Let's keep talking. Now let's talk about the difference between a prime and a zoom lens. This is going to be a brief overview, as I plan on doing a full video regarding the difference between primes and zooms. So if you're interested in that, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss out when that video launches. But the Sony wide open is going to give you a great image. It's a prime lens, so you can get down to f1.8 and the image is going to look really nice, really crisp, really clear. Wide open, that lens looks fantastic. It's pretty much sharp corner to corner, as it's a prime lens, and it's got better glass because that glass does not have to move. So you're able to put fixed glass in there and make it look real nice, real sharp. Now the Tamron is good wide open. Right now we are wide open. We're sitting at f2.8, so we're looking pretty good right now, but you can get a little vignetting up in the corners. And if I haven't given it away, I did switch back to the Tamron 17 to 28mm lens. Currently sitting at a 24mm focal length, so nice and tight here, but you do get a little vignetting in the corner at f2.8. You stop that down to f4 and that vignetting pretty much goes away. Let me show you what I mean. And there you go. So now the vignetting is pretty much gone away. We're sitting at f4.0, or one of the other things is you get less background separation when you're at f4. So let's go ahead and switch it back to f2. And now we're back to an f2.8 aperture. So you get a little bit more separation in the background. So if you do have some clutter, it's definitely a little bit cleaner. All right, so now I headed outside. I wanted to let you know what it would look like if you were walking with either one of these lenses. Right now I have the Tamron 17 to 28mm on it, 17mm. Want to give you an idea of what walking and vlogging would look like. I currently am using my Sony A7 IV, no active stabilization on. Let's go ahead, we're gonna turn on active stab and you can see the difference. Now we have the active stabilization on, so the shot is still very wide, and with the active stab on, it does end up cropping in 1.1 times. So that's gonna get you to about a 19-ish millimeter focal length. But this is the stabilization with the active stab on. I am definitely not being light-footed here at all, but this is what it would look like if you were using the 17mm wide angle view on this lens. I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to the 20mm so we can take a look at that, and that's gonna be at about a 22mm focal length with the active stab on. But neither lens has stabilization. If you're gonna be walking with this, I would recommend, if you have the Sony A7 IV or the A7S III, that you turn the active stab on. So let's go ahead, we'll switch over to the other lens and see how that looks. Okay, so now we're on the 20mm. This is with no stabilization on. Now they say the wider the lens, the less stabilization you need, but we're gonna go ahead and test that by switching it into active stabilization. Now, the 17mm is definitely gonna get you a wider look. It's gonna get you closer to a 19mm look, where this is gonna get you closer to that 22mm look. So let's go ahead, we'll switch into that, see how active mode looks there. Okay, so this is the 20mm with active stabilization on. Now you can always use catalyst browse too, and do some gyro stabilization on both these lenses. So maybe you wanna go with an even wider look, stick at that 17 to 20mm, and then just let let Catalyst browse do its thing. But the problem is that if you're vlogging, you want to turn these videos out quick. You don't want to have to worry about having to stabilize the footage and really make it look great. I would probably recommend just sticking with the active if you're on the Sony a7 IV or the a7S III. If not, then you're gonna have to just deal with some shake on any of the other full frame cameras. So if you're using like the a7C or a7 III, you're gonna get some shake. It's just the way it is. But the wider the lens, the less that shake affects your subject and the more it affects kind of the quarters. Man, it's really cold out here. It's 27 degrees, so that's like -2 or 3 Celsius. What I can tell you is that both lenses do an exceptional job vlogging. Which one is ultimately the best one? Before I get to that, let's go ahead. We're gonna head back inside. While I'm doing that, go ahead, do me a favor. If you're liking this review, liking this comparison video, go ahead, hit that like button down below and comment down below on which lens you are leaning towards and why. I'd love to know why you've decided to go with the lens and ultimately which one you think is better. Let's have that conversation down below. First, like I said, it's 27 degrees out here. Let's get inside. All right, so let's put a bow on this thing. So which one ultimately am I gonna go with? Am I going with the Sony 20mm G Master lens or the Tamron 17 to 28mm? Well, I can tell you, I already own the Sony 20mm lens and I absolutely love this lens. Am I getting rid of this lens? No, I am not. I'm gonna continue to use this lens for as long as I don't have the Tamron lens. Now, the Tamron lens I did receive from Delaware Camera as a loaner. So to let me borrow this, they do offer lens rentals along with film development. They're big on old school film. So if you're looking to get film processed, or even like myself, I had old high 8 tapes that I had them convert to digital, which they did a fantastic job. It was done in like about a week. Definitely check out the link down in the description below for theCameraSpot.com. That's their official website. On there you can buy some Sony gear and you can get some film, some video transferred and things of that nature. But check them out down in the link below. I do appreciate them letting me borrow this lens, but what am I ultimately gonna do? Which lens am I ultimately gonna go with? The Sony, I like this lens. I really do. I like how light it is. It's great for low lights. If I'm doing some low light vlogging, this is the lens that I'm going to be using. This is the one that's going to be in the bag. Down the road, what I would like to do is put this lens on my list to buy in 2022. This lens right here, this Tamron 17 to 28mm lens is definitely one that I want to pick up in the future. I like how wide it is. I live in a very small house, so to be able to shoot family videos with a very nice wide 17mm lens, it definitely makes it easier to take some great video. Plus, I like the fact that it's got the zoom. Sometimes you just want to kind of emphasize things. So what do? You're at the 17mm, you zoom in to 24 to 28mm, and you got yourself a great shot. At the end of the day, this is a great lens. You're not going to go wrong with either one of these lenses. It really depends on what you need. Do you need more reach, more zoom? Tamron's the way to go. If you want a fixed focal length, shorter lens, this is going to be the lens for you. It's also going to be a little bit better in low light. So which one to go with? I'm going to leave that up to you. Comment down below on which one you want to go with. Again, thanks to my friends at Delaware Camera for loaning me this lens. If you like this video, I'm sure you're gonna like the video on the screen now. It's about another full frame lens for the Sony E Mount system. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thanks for watching and hanging out. See you in the next one.